People's right to dissent does not mean taking the law into their hands. The more that Modi has grown in stature, the more some seem determined to oppose him. The capital's worst riot in decades have now mercifully been contained, albeit with a dreadful loss of dozens of lives. It can hardly be coincidental that after simmering under the surface for 2 months amid sporadic incidents, violence suddenly flared up on the day of United States President Donald Trump visited Delhi. On that day, it is another matter that the visit proved to be a big success, with significant progress in bilateral relationship of the world's two largest democracies. They did sign a lot of deals, and US agreed on giving India 3 billion worth of defense purchases. Worryingly, even in such circumstances, conflicting partisan narratives continue to prevail, when what is desperately needed is objectivity and restraint, but also clear red lines and firm, resolute enforcement of those. But that is easier said than done. While it is easy to criticize Delhi police, their predicament is worth pondering over. First, there is a fatigue factor of having had to continually be on edge during 2 months of protest, during which they were repeatedly attacked with stones, not to mention shot at, and had acid thrown on them. Next, whether they chased stone pelters from outside Jamia Millia Islamia into the university's library or refrained from going inside the Jawaharlal Nehru University campus when vandals went on rampage there, they faced opprobrium. Third, in the age of heightened altered to potential human rights accusation, their dilemma is choosing between stern proactive steps and waiting for the general public to accept the need for a crackdown. Must be a tricky part to navigate. It is no exaggeration to say that the police were being battered physically and psychologically from all sides. In the meantime, while the Supreme Court refused to intervene in public interest litigations against the police action at Jamia, saying the maintenance of law and order was the first priority. It was far from being very ambiguous on the extended agitation at the Shaheen Bagh, which has been going on for 2 months, and the Delhiites are fed up of those people. They have been blocking the roads for 2 months, and that's a major link between the state of India, the largest state of India, UP, and Delhi. One aspect that stood out during the past weeks was the apparent polarization in the media, when some journalists perceived to be sympathetic to the government were manhandled by the protesters at that Shaheen Bagh site. Not all in their fraternity condemned it, but that sad situation came full circle in recent days when some among those considered anti establishment also faced physical assault at the hands of another set of violent protesters. Similarly, incendiary statements from the Shaheen Bagh protester activist celebrity as well as several politicians from around the nation yielded partisan responses. This tribalism of responding to every development through an us versus them prism is, of course, not unique to India. And although more was ferociously alleged by those on the left against their opponent. It reigns across the political spectrum. In fact, in recent decades, it has become the norm in democracies around the globe, which is why President Trump India's visit saw both politicians and some in the media in both India and US react in noticeably partisan terms. Sadly, even India's largest opposition party, which had itself prioritized this relationship in government, turned critical of the Trump's visit and for no good reason from Indian perspective other than the chemistry he seems to have with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And therein lies the crux of the situation. The more that the PM has grown in stature, the more some seem determined to oppose him at any cost without regard to principles or consequences. Nothing else can explain their rabid response to the Citizenship Amendment Act, the principle of which has been espoused by every major Indian leader from Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and to Manmohan Singh, the last non-BJP Prime Minister. It is cynical when the most political opponent of Modi privately acknowledged that CAA itself neither discriminates nor poses any threat to any Indian citizen of any religion. Some do have objection to the possibility of a national register of citizens, although there is as yet no formal proposal for it. If there were to be one, they could, of course, oppose it, go to court, make it an election issue, and even agitate against it. But the anti CAA agitation, which has deliberately misled many Muslims in believing they would be disenfranchised, is misguided best and malevolent at the worst. Of course, all of us have the right to dissent, but the dissent either must not include taking the law into our hands, such as vandalizing public property, blocking public roads, and assaulting people, or must concede that our opponents have just as much right to do the same. It is the first time Indians stood on principles and not on personalities, likes and dislikes.